Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Fuller Kamara. Today we're in chapter 28, recording undeposited funds. Undeposited funds, these are payments that haven't reached a bank account. This mechanism keeps track of clients' checks until they take them to the bank. The undeposited fund account is meant to be a temporary holding account that tracks payments. Its main function is to make reconciliation easier by combining multiple transactions into a single record. The advantages of using undeposited funds: by combining multiple transactions into a single record, this process makes it easy for the client to match the bank register with their bank statement. For example, if the bank receives a check of $100 and $300 and deposits those checks, the bank records them as one $400 deposit. So now let's look at using undeposited funds. Using undeposited funds incorrectly may result in overstated income. For example, if the client marks an invoice as paid and then assign the receipt fund to a bank account instead of undeposited fund account, the company may appear to have more cash on hand than it actually does. Also, if they create a deposit to an asset account, they inflate the asset account and cause imbalance in the balance sheet, recording payments as undeposited funds. So in order for us to record payments that we receive from the customers as undeposited funds, we go to the plus new and then select receive payment. So once we select receive payment, now we need to select from which customer. Let's say we receive payment. First of all, before we receive payment, let's create an invoice first so that we can apply payment to that invoice. Once we apply payment, then we can deposit the transaction into the bank. So let's see how these three processes works in QuickBooks Online. So first, to create an invoice, we select plus new and then invoice. So once we select the invoice, we can select the customer, let's say Amy. We can also select the terms and the date, the invoice date, today's date, and the due date, October 23. So now on the product, let's select pump. So for the pump, let's change the quantity to 30. Then we can also add a message to the invoice, or we can add an attachment to the invoice. But in this case, we can just save. So once we click save and send, so now you can preview. You can see the preview here. We save and close. So you see we got this message because we're using a sample company and the email is not active. So in a live version, once we click save and send, the invoice will be sent automatically to the customer. Okay, so now let's create an let's receive payment for that invoice that we've just created. So now to receive payment, we go to plus new and select receive payment. So on the customer, remember the customer that we selected, it was Amy. Okay, so now you can see the invoice that we created, the 1038 is 486. So the 486 is the amount that we're going to receive payment for. So on the customer, once we select the customer, all outstanding invoices will pop up. So we'll see all the outstanding invoices for this specific customer. So let's say the customer pay us. We want to make sure for which invoice did the customer pay for. So now we've seen that the customer, let's say the customer has paid the 486. So even though we have another invoice for 459, so this invoice is still outstanding. Okay. So now we can see the date also, the payment date, let's say today's date, and the payment method. How did the customer pay us? Is it through the credit card or is it through a check? So in this case, we can say a check. Okay, so now we can put the reference number as 124. So now deposit to, where do we want to deposit this payment to? We put it in the undeposited fund. Don't put it in a bank account, because if you put it in a bank account, it will create a duplicate, and which will cause the balance sheet to become imbalanced. So that's the reason why we use undeposited fund. So think about undeposited fund like an account where you just just keep track of all the payments received. And at the end of the day, you say, okay, now let me take this total amount, let me take it to the bank. So that's what undeposited fund is all about. Like, it keeps tracks of all the payments that we receive. So when you put the money in the undeposited fund account, the checking account has no impact on the checking account because you haven't deposited the money yet to the bank. That's why we say undeposited fund, because you have not deposited, but you have received it from the customer. You have received it, but you have not deposited it yet to the bank. So that's what the undeposited fund is saying. So it's just helping us to record what we've received so we can keep track of what the customer has paid before we can now deposit it to the bank, so that it will help us with the reconciliation. So let's say if we receive $100, then we create that deposit, and then we receive another $200. So whatever we say we deposit in the checking account, that's what we show in our bank statement in terms of the reconciliation. So this undeposited fund account will help us with our reconciliation process because we are able to deposit a bulk amount. If we receive 200 from one customer, 300 from another customer, which gives us $500, and then let's say 1,000 from another customer. So now we got 1,500 in our undeposited fund. So if we go ahead and record a deposit that with that 1,500, when we go to do our reconciliation, it will save us time because we just have one transaction that showed up in the bank statement, which is the 1,500. But let's say if we had deposited the 300 directly into our bank account, and then we receive another 200, we deposit it directly to our bank account, then meaning when we are doing our reconciliation, we had to reconcile each of these transactions separately. You see? So we would have reconciled the 300, we reconciled the 200, and then reconciled the 1,000. So we had like 3 transactions to reconcile. Whereas if we put it in the undeposited fund, we only have one transaction in this case to reconcile. So you see, this is the main purpose of the undeposited fund account. So once we've added deposit to the undeposited funds, we can select from the check mark, we can select which invoice do we want to apply the payment that we received to. So let's say because we've received the 486, so we apply to this payment, to this invoice. Remember, sometimes the customer might pay less than what was on the invoice. So in that case, we can apply the amount. Let's say if the customer had just paid the 400. So instead of applying the 486, we would have applied on the payments column the 400 that we just received. So forget about these other columns. That is the original amount and the opening balance column. So what we are concerned about is this payment. So we only record the payment. What the customer actually paid is what we record on this payment column here. This one. That's what we record. So now, but let's assume the customer has actually paid the 486, the full amount. Okay, so if the customer paid the 486, meaning we apply the 486. So now you can see the amount here that says amount to apply says 486. So if we had say 400, then this amount would change. You see, the amount applied will become 400. So we don't record 486 when we actually receive 400. Okay, so 486 is what we actually receive in this case. That's why I'm recording the 486. So now once we click this check mark, so on the memo we can put in whatever we want to put in, the message that we want to send to the customer. So we can also attach anything that we want to attach to this payment receipt. So once we finish, we click save and send, or save and close. Okay, in this case I will just save and send. So now it takes us to the preview. We can see how the receipt will look like, the payment receipt will look like. Okay, save. Now we say save and close. So you can see we got a pop-up saying, because this is a sample company. So now after we've recorded the payment receipt, now let's go and record. So now let's add a payment to a deposit. So now to add a payment to a deposit, let's click the plus new and go to the other column, select bank deposit. So now the payment that we've just received, we are now going to add those payments to a bank deposit. So let's select now checking is the account, and the amount here, you see we had the check amount of 486. So you can see this is the check that is currently in our undeposited fund account. So now we're coming to move this amount from our undeposited fund to the bank. Remember, you can see currently in our bank balance we have 3,463. That's our bank balance in the checking. But if we deposit this 486, this balance will change. So you see, even though we have recorded the 486, this amount has not been reflected in our checking because the amount was in something like a suspense account. We just hold a temporal. So this is also another way to know if the client's books have been reconciled, or if the client has been keeping proper books, or how clean are the client's books, by looking at the balance sheet to see if there is a balance in the undeposited fund, and also on the unassigned income and unassigned asset account. If we see balances in this account, we know there are some issues with the client's books. So now you see we have 486 in the undeposited fund. So now let's select the check mark. So once we select this check mark, so now you see this 486 now will be applied to our 3,463. So once we select that, if we have another additional fund that we want to deposit, we can add it here. We can add it from which customer and then the account. We have that option. But in this case, we are going to just record this amount, the 486 in it. We are just going to deposit this amount. So we can add a memo or add the attachment. So once we finish, we also have the option here to make recurring, but we're not gonna do that in this case. If you have not seen our recurring transactions, I suggest you watch chapter 26 and chapter 27. Okay, so now once we finish, we click save and close. Okay, so that's how you record the payment to a deposit account. To check whether the payment has been deposited or not, so now let's go to the sales center and select the invoice. So once we select the invoice tab, remember the sales center has the overview, all sales, invoice, estimate. So you haven't seen the previous chapters, I suggest you watch the previous chapters to know these various tabs, what they do. So now, to know whether the payment has been applied, you can see from the money bar of the deposit section of the money bar, you can see that the money bar has overdue balance of 1325. So once we click this 1325, you can see all the transactions that are overdue, or the invoices that are overdue. So if we click the gray, it will show you all the invoices that are not yet due. Now we can, if we click there is no there are no transaction that has not been deposited yet. So that's why you see 0 here. So now to know the amount that we've just deposited, you click this. So these are the invoices that have been paid. Okay, these are the invoices that have been paid. The reason why you are seeing some of these overdue amount, these are the ones where we apply some payment that still has balances, where we apply partial payment. You can see some of these are partially paid, so they still have like 39, even though these are deposits. The 450, 750, these are the deposits amount, but we still have some unpaid amount, which is the 450, 39, and also $4. So that's why you are seeing some of these. And you can see the 486 that we've just paid. Okay, so now when we click that 486, you can see the date. This was sent on the 9/23, and then the dates paid. You can see also this was paid on the same date, that is 9/23/2023. So now you can see the amount. So if we want to view this payment, we can click this. So you see it takes us to the payment window again, where we receive this payment. So that's how to record undeposited funds. And After recording the undeposited fund, then we deposit it into the bank account, which is the checking, and also check whether the amount has been recorded. So if we want to see the checking, let's say we want to see the details in the checking account, we can go to accounting and chart of account. Also you can see here, so you can see if you click view register, you can see that this is the amount that was deposited, you see, in our checking account. So now you can see the 486 was the amount that was deposited. You see, now our checking balance is now 3,949.52, which is due to this deposit. That's the end of chapter 28, recording undeposited funds. Please don't forget to subscribe, like if you like the video, share and comment. See you in the next video. Thank you.